Okay, just a second, please. All right, so I think I need a new laptop. Mine is very old and was abused. I mean, it has hundreds of PowerPoint presentations, and now I don't have a memory in it at all. But anyway, I hope it will function today as well. So this is the name of the office now of Zaha, Zaha Architects, and I only show some new works, but essentially it's an homage to Patrick Schumacher, and let's wish him a happy birthday. It's his birthday. So this is the man. He's actually a thinker, and I think he's brilliant in the field of theory. But this is unique also, because how many people run offices of such dimensions and at the same time so-called find time to create theories and to debate and to promote ideas and so on. He does. And he said in an interview that the only reason to have a home is to have where to have your books. But since now you can have your books on a tablet, on a how are they called, Kindle, or you don't even need the library. So you actually don't need the home. You don't need the house. So I imagine he's actually some kind of a nomad and bohemian. And this man, yes, runs one of the big offices, architecture offices in the world. And here they are, the two of them. He sometimes dresses a little bit in a funny way, but even this thing he has on him is a little bit funny, I think. But they are interesting, They and the building behind them is also excellent. Is in the United States. I will not show it now because it was built while Zaha was alive, and this is about what they did after Zaha died. Another picture. I think they had an interesting relationship. I think they respected each other, and there was some affection and some understanding. And I imagine, I know Zaha was not an easy person at all. In fact, I saw the Guggenheim Museum in New York when she had her retrospective there. I saw a film where she dismissed, meaning she fired one of her employees while she was giving an interview. A young blonde man came to her and whispered something in her ear, and she said right there in the middle of the interview, "You are fired, go." So I'm sure she was authoritarian, she was difficult, she was capricious, and somehow the gentleman on the left was able to go under her skin somehow. And, I don't think it was a performance that anyone was capable of. You see him young here, and I don't know. I feel like contemplating this picture and maybe she was maternal towards him. I don't know. I think a psychoanalyst could write an interesting book about Zaha and Patrick. Of course, with that background of books, almost anyone could look nice and interesting, because it's nice to have books. Now, I don't think this is her office, but they were kind of young. I mean, look at him, Anyway, and here they are already high fashion. You see the candy and whatever, but I have a feeling that beyond the glamour, and beyond their friendship, there was also a level of solitude and loneliness. I even have my own theory that perhaps Zaha died in part, at least, because of a basic or fundamental or deeply seated feeling of loneliness. Yet she had all the success in the world, but in other matters, all that success doesn't mean too much. And the way he, again, the way he is dressed and so on, I have a feeling he was some kind of a nomad. Anyway, I like him. Now, the Russian mega smart city, it's an ongoing project. So Zaha Hadid Architects, working in collaboration with a Russian office, has been selected as one of three consortiums to realize the neighborhood in the west of the Russian capital, Moscow. The team will work with fellow winners, and you see them, to develop 4 million square meters of new buildings, with plural, of course, over 460 hectares. Over 1/3 of the new neighborhoods will be parklands and forests bordering the Moscow River, with a centerpiece 30-hectare lake. And this project was done after she died. And here I want to show you, no, it's not this one. It's another project where I have a video that is quite nice. But even here you can tell that, they are adventurous. Of course, it's the signature architecture of Zaha Hadid Architects, but within the framework that defines the aesthetics of their architecture, there is a lot of variety. If I have any reticence vis-a-vis their works or vis-a-vis part of their works is the whiteness. I have been in a building, in a major building by Zaha in Vienna, the library in the students' campus, and it didn't look like a library. It could have been anything else. Yes, an impressive building, but this whiteness, and at times it could be a little bit predictable, their architecture, although, in terms of space and volumes and, dynamics, seems very inciting and provocative. But there is a level of mundanity that I think Schumacher is aware of, and he fights against through his latest theory or the latest phase of parametricism, which is tectonicism or tectonism. And so I think he tries to, in a way, to fight exactly against that whiteness that I mentioned, and which you can still see here. Otherwise, in terms of the movement and dynamics and fluidity and so on, is fine. Now, this is a work in China, and this one, now, unfortunately, this one I didn't prepare. But yes, I did, sorry. I didn't recognize it because of the name. So because I'm unable to incorporate the video in my presentation, I have to I have to handle it the primitive way. But please be a little bit patient. It's this one. Okay. Okay, just a second. It's a little bit inconvenient, but Okay, so I'm not so sure it's a good idea to show videos. I will not show the next one. So I will just continue with this presentation. I hope you see it. Yes, you should see it. So again, with all my almost exaltation towards their activity, I do have this reticence, to use this word, that it is a little bit too sleek for my taste, and this excessive whiteness. So, but I think Patrick Schumacher is aware of some of the problems, because I've heard him talk about, and in fact, his interest in tectonics could maybe improve a little bit what might be, in part at least, a deficiency. But you know, they open up new horizons in architecture, and they did it for some time. Maybe right now we don't think this is a new horizon, because it's some kind of déjà vu to an extent. But I think they can reinvent themselves. Now you see 5 Zaha design projects, but which were finished or in the process of being finished after her death. And who is responsible for that? Of course, the whole office. But, you know, Patrick is a very important presence there. So in good measure is him. And you probably know this Morpheus hotel in Macau, which was finalized. And you could say, especially now from the perspective of the pandemic, that you know, the excessiveness and the flamboyance of the buildings is maybe questionable. I would agree in part, yes, but you know, they did this in a different context, and you know, the opulence of some countries, maybe Macau is not so opulent, but it's not just about, I mean, in a way, architecture was always excessive, you know, or very often. I mean, the pyramids are excessive. The Gothic cathedrals are excessive. You know, the Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright is excessive. So many of the architectures that we admire were and are excessive. There are some qualities in this building, and I think this some kind of modern interpretation of some kind of a Gothic kind of aesthetics is one of these qualities. The way they are able to transform the structure into ornament, and the ornament into structure, is, I think, worth contemplating and developing, because I think this is a gain that was obtained. One of the gains obtained through parametric design, that today, as you can see even here, the barrier between structure and ornament became diluted, almost non-existent. And he himself said in a lecture he gave that structure and ornament should not be separated. And I totally agree. And unfortunately, in many schools of architecture, ornament is still neglected, but you cannot have structure without ornament. And this he understood, and this their office understood, and they are able to create these entities that are halfway between structure and ornament, and they are both, actually. And in this respect, I think they need to be admired. Otherwise, of course, we can question on many grounds, you know, the opulence, you know, the flamboyance. But as I said, many of the great architectures of the past were just that, excessive. Not all of them, but many of them. And it is, you know, beyond liking or disliking, we cannot not acknowledge the level of excellence. You know, many people, many architects can't even draw something like this. Forget about building. And they build, and it's not the only building they build. I mean, look at these complexities here. It is amazing. I know I couldn't do it. I don't have the knowledge to even draw something like this. I can sketch, you know, freehand, but to make it rigorously and you know, to be able to build, no. So, you know, whoever wants to throw stones at the Zaha Hadid Architects can do so, but without a lot of legitimacy, I think. She succeeded. I know today is Patrick's birthday, but he is her lieutenant, you know, and leading now her army because the general died. But she succeeded in a male's world brilliantly. You know, in London, here came a woman from Baghdad, and she arrived at the highest level. So bravo to her. This is a building which actually I think she died in Miami while visiting the building site of this building in Miami, this tower. You know, again, you know, the authors of the building on the left and the authors of the building on the right might claim that her building or their building is, I don't know, you know, unnecessarily, you know, inflated or flamboyant, but that's because they tried again to work in that in-between space, interstitial space between structure and ornament, while the others completely ignore that. You know, in the other buildings, left and right, you just have the structure and the ornament is missing, and there is no relationship between them because, yes, the ornament is missing. And, you know, the constructive effort, of course, the moralist, like sometimes I am, would say, wait a minute, you know, there are so many poor people in Miami, and it's true, there are. And now with the pandemic, the city is ravished by the pandemic. It's true, but, you know, maybe they would not have built in this way in the present, maybe. But, you know, if you look at their building, you know, in the proximity of the other towers in Miami, it stands out. And it stands out, and, you know, this is not a sufficient quality, of course. Architecture shouldn't just stand out, you know, but I think sometimes, at least sometimes, standing out is with merit. Now, this is, I don't think this was built, or not yet. In the material I found and I'm presenting, it says that it opens in 2018, but I didn't see images with it being, it's a residential, high density residential complex, actually, more than a building. So this would be the first, you know, venture in Mexico. And I have a video with this too, but I don't trust any longer videos in PowerPoint presentations. So I will just, and it's not such a, somehow this is, well, maybe this is a quality. It's a little lower key, this project, than some other projects. Unfortunately, again, these houses, these apartments are not for everybody. And this is my, a certain concern I have that, you know, the moralist in me that I already mentioned, that somehow I regret that Zaha and her office didn't dedicate more time to build for those in need, for the underprivileged. Maybe if they assumed, you know, that strata of society, they maybe, I don't know, I almost said that maybe she would not have died, because her loneliness, I think, was also in part because she was indulging herself in a dialogue with a mundane, you know, elite, and was not closer to the, you know, to those people who constitute the roots of life in a way, the base. something Le Corbusier actually did. Maybe Le Corbusier refused to go to parties, high-end parties. He said, I prefer to talk with fishermen at the edge of the sea. And he had, so-called simple people as friends. I think that kept Le Corbusier rooted. Zaha, instead, she was flying high in the vicinity of a society that itself was flying high, high-end designers and so on. So anyway, this is my theory that somehow she divorced herself from what would have been healthy to be connected with. This one I'm not going to show. Now the airport in Beijing, it opened, the largest airport in the world, and it has some impressive features. So to cope with growing outbound traffic, 4.5 billion trips, well, that was the estimate. But now with the pandemic, things change dramatically. And this virus is teaching us lessons that maybe we need. China is building what is built as the world's biggest airport, unofficially called the Beijing International Airport. The site is 67 kilometers south of the capital. Anyway, these are, data. It will have 7 runways, cost 12 billion and so on. Handle 100 million passengers a year. But you see, this pandemic transforms all this information into almost irrelevance, because who knows? Who knows what will happen by 2040? One thing is for sure, not too many people fly now. So, but designed to look like a phoenix spreading its wings, construction was delayed in December last year, when more than 200 tombs from the Qing dynasty were unearthed during construction. In China, there are still undiscovered great treasures. But the building is not to be ignored. And look at it, from above. They had a vision when they built it, when they designed it, and it was built, and it is impressive in many respects. It's not just that it is big. It is big. It is the biggest, maybe, but there is more to it. And again, the haters would say, so what? What's so great? Well, just to handle functionally, the biggest airport in the world would not have been easy. I mean, look at those valises and those luggages, Of course, today we might not be able to take such pictures, but at that time it was very possible. It was built, and I like it actually more during construction. Again, the moralist and the reticent and the timid would claim, what? So what? So what? So why? Well, with this kind of mentality, you can dismiss some of the greatest architectures in the world. The defeatist will always criticize something. But I still think it's a remarkable airport, and they had a vision. There is a symbolism. The functions, I imagine, are handled properly. And yes, it was a very expensive construction, but what do you expect from the biggest airport in the world? I mean, the opera in Sydney also was a flamboyant gesture, and now we cannot imagine Sydney without its opera. I particularly like these images, this one, and I like this one very much, because it shows the web, the structural web, the complexity, the richness, the depth, the viscerality. Okay, now they proposed this building, but I don't think it was built either in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, a metro station. This beautifully designed project has all the distinctive trademark curves of a Hadid structure, a key part of the city's transport network. The station is on the edge of the King Abdullah financial district and will function as a major interchange between 3 of the city's 6 new metro lines. It is true, their architecture is not addressing, or was not addressing until now, the difficult times and crises we go through, the climate change, you know, now the pandemic. There are all kinds of issues that we have to handle, and maybe, I don't know how Zaha would have continued to build if she was alive. But at that time, you know, Saudi Arabia had all the money in the world, and you know, why not build, you know, in this way? You know, I mean, the skyline there is not of a modest city, and so why should at least this one is horizontal? Well, for a metro station, it would have been difficult to be vertical. Anyway, it was not built, or not built yet, but I don't think it even started. So you see the plans, the big plans, the big estimates, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. This also was supposed to open in 2021. I only have one image. It's a master plan for Singapore, which was estimated that would change you know, the architectonic image of Singapore. This plan for a large neighborhood in the city-state capable of serving a population of 130,000 people is a true reflection of the avant-garde sketches from early on in Hadid's career. Said to be a 500-acre tech center, the project is well into its 20th year development cycle, and is set to dramatically change the city skyline. I don't know, I only saw this. And indeed, there is some connection with her early artworks or renderings that she did even in school. Okay, and now the last project that I show is, this was done after she died. So they won this competition for the Sound Wave Concert Hall by Zaha Hadid Architects, and Patrick was involved. And this is the project. I don't know again if they will build it, but they won the competition. And you can tell there are differences between nuances between one project and the other. The design of the Sound Wave Concert Hall is based on the properties of musical sound resonance, creating wave vibrations in a continuous smooth surface. The result is amazing, and we can't wait to see the finished result. Anyway, someone said that. I think a musician or someone responsible with this building. I'm not reading, or I should read it. I don't know what to do. Sometimes it's hard for me to no, I'm not reading it. So they won the competition. So if the Russians are going to build a building, it will be their building probably. You know, they a lot of data here, but what is important to remember perhaps is the love affair between Zaha and the Russian avant-garde, the one of the first, you know, at the beginning of the 20th century. We see here some kind of approximations of the cave, and I'm preparing a PowerPoint presentation about the cave revival or architecture and prehistory, because it seems, I actually think we are some kind of at some kind of an end, and that's why we think of beginnings, and that's why some important architectures today bring back the cave. Arata Isozaki does it, Doshi did it, Zaha does it, Genie Gang from Studio Gang does it. So there is something in the air, and the fact that we are flirting with the beginnings, meaning with the cave, meaning with prehistory, when we are at the peak of our civilization, to me seems to indicate that we are in front of a threshold or on a threshold. And I don't know what will happen and how it will happen, but something will happen, I think, because this is again unique. you know, Palladio went back to the forum in Rome, but not to the cave. We go back to the cave. And this is very interesting. It is as if we don't trust history any longer. Christos Passas, who is a partner now with, he works together with Patrick Schumacher, declared about this project. Russia has been a formative influence on Zaha Hadid Architects' creative work. From very early in her career, Zaha was attracted to the Russian avant-garde, who conceived civic spaces as urban condensers that catalyze a public realm of activity to enrich creativity and community. Who would have thought? He certainly didn't think, and nobody thought, that not much later, you know, we'll have to wear masks and we'll have to respect social distancing and so on. So you see, our predictions are destined to who knows what. Allowing space itself to enhance anyway. These principles are embedded within the design of this Philharmonic Concert Hall. Dimitri Lis, artistic director and principal conductor of this Philharmonic Orchestra and member of the design competition, said, for musicians, this new hall is crucial. It will be a musical instrument that brings the sound to life. And with this, I thought I ended this presentation on this preliminary presentation on Patrick Schumacher. I just want to, for me, this is very important. It's from a lecture by Patrick Schumacher, where he, to an extent, correctly identifies various phases of so-called modern architecture. And you see, what is perhaps a little strange is that he uses the word style, which is not very common. You know, in fact, I know architects like Jean Guin who rejects the word style. And I think Le Corbusier also would have rejected it. But he seems to like this word. But it's interesting, he starts with functionalism, you know, like as if modernism started with functionalism, then it went through organicism, rationalism, brutalism, metabolism, high tech. And then you have these two transitional styles, as he calls them, postmodernism and deconstructivism. And then he comes back to a different era in a way, parametricism, and he identifies until now, until the time when he made this presentation, foldisms, blobisms, swarmisms, and tectonism. I have some doubts about these isms. I usually don't like isms, and I don't like systems. But it's beyond the point if I like them or not. He seems to like them. I personally think it's a little bit of a problem there. You know, I think great art and great architecture go beyond isms, you know, because they break barriers. But he's in, you know, questing for some kind of order, or, you know, finding categories and disciplining you know, architectural activities. But what is very interesting is that, you know, he thinks that this is the latest, you know, as you see here, you know, the latest tectonism. And that's because he perhaps feels that somehow parametricism misses tectonics, you know, and the materiality is not sufficiently present and articulated. This is a word he likes, articulated, and also repertoire. He uses the word repertoire very often. Anyway, I do think Patrick Schumacher is an interesting man, and maybe he will evolve towards even more interesting architectures. And I like the fact that he doesn't separate ornament and structure. He said in this very lecture, from which I took the diagram, ornament and structure are not separate. Perhaps correctly is to say are not separated. Anyway, forget grammar now. The important thing is that he understands something that we should understand, that structure by itself is not sufficient. Structure needs ornament. And he says it himself, ornament and structure are not separated, and they shouldn't be separated. And the next slide is the same, and the next slide is the same, and you know, they don't change. By actually I created four pages, you know, by duplicating the same one. Ornament and structure are not separated. separated. I need a D there. Anyway, this was Patrick Schumacher, and now I go to the postponed Theo van Doesburg. Theo van Doesburg, you see what is beautiful about these artists and these architects and these non-artists, because Patrick Schumacher actually seems to be against the vision that architecture is an art. And maybe he's right to an extent. We can talk about that. But I admire Theo van Doesburg, although he was probably an impossible man. I admire Piet Mondrian, I admire Anthony Gormley, I admire Patrick Schumacher. These people, and of course I admire Zaha Hadid. These people are making life, you know, bearable because of their creativity. And when I look back to the Stil and I read and look at what Theo van Doesburg did, you know, I become inspired and I become hopeful, and I want to be myself creative and exuberant and so on. But Theo van Doesburg, who died rather young, I think he died at 48, was a difficult man, and he made many enemies. He even made enemies, I think, of his former friend, Piet Mondrian, the great painter. He was an artist, but he also built. Not much. And in a way, I wonder a little bit about the merits of the Stil. I admire the Stil very much, but they didn't build much, you know. He only built a cafe and, you know, his own house at the outskirts of Paris. Anyway, this is the man. I know he alienated also the people at the Bauhaus. I read that he was conflictual and, yeah, he probably had an abrasive personality. But I think he had a strong personality and he had something to say, and he did say it. I read that, you know, at first, when they didn't know each other, they became friends from a distance by writing letters, him and Piet Mondrian, the great painter. But when they met each other in person, you know, soon afterwards, they distanced themselves from each other because, you know, the love affair from afar was not sustainable any longer. Anyway, these are models of the Stil, you know, architectures done by him, axonometrics, primary colors. This is what the Stil was about. And it's very interesting that simultaneous or contemporaneous with the Stil was the School of Amsterdam, which was diametrically opposed, but not less significant, and unfortunately is less known. Anyway, in a strange way, society resists the avant-garde, doesn't accept it, but on the other hand, in retrospect, you know, we cannot live without it, and society doesn't live without it. Society, the bourgeois needs the provocations of the avant-garde artist. The avant-garde artist says, "Épatez la bourgeoisie," and the bourgeoisie takes revenge, ignores the artist, but in the end, somehow, you know, the artworks of the avant-garde sell with the highest amount of money and, you know, achieves post-mortem success. This is the, you know, the famous, you know, cafe that he built in Strasbourg. And, you know, he didn't build much else besides a house in Paris. But this one is a very famous work and is like the total artwork. You know, his architecture, his space organization, his function, his decoration, his, I mean, decorative arts is everything. And this is the, you know, the crux of his oeuvre. I would have expected more, but maybe also because he died rather young. Anyway, it's an important building in the history of or you know, not the whole building, but the interior. The interior is well known in the history of modern architecture. Now we have Café Aubette. This is another work, and you see the drawings. You know, a little bit childish, but also abstract at the same time. No, I think no, I was wrong. I think he did another work, but this work changed names. Is the same work, Café Aubette. Is known with two different names. Now you see the studio house in Meudon Val-Fleury in Paris. This is his own house, and now is the foundation, the Theo van Doesburg Foundation. He built it for him and his wife. And you know, the typical modernist building, but this one has also primary colors. And you see at the bottom there, I think is him and his wife. Anyway, the architect is easy to be recognized. Otherwise, the constructive technique is quite primitive, as you can see. Anyway, inside seems to be like a comfortable place, and it is a monument to himself in a way. You know, it's a house that celebrates him. And that's why it's his foundation there. I had another presentation, that's why I'm a little bit unsettled. I was panicking because before we started, I couldn't find any longer. I have another, I'm not a very organized man. I have another presentation, and sometimes, you know, they are named in the same way with the same name, but one is longer, one is shorter, and you know, it's hard for me to identify them. I know I have another presentation on Theo van Doesburg, more ample, but I'm happy that at least I found this one. Anyway, essentially, there is just that cafe and this house he built for himself in France, not in the Netherlands. And this is the view towards the facade towards the garden. A nice studio, of course, with all that glass. He didn't care too much about energy or energy losses, but as Philip Johnson said, if you are concerned with the bill, the electricity bill, the energy bill, you should be careful about using too much glass. Anyway, there were different times, and maybe he had the means. I don't know. Art is not being but becoming is one of the pronouncements quoted by to reflect van Doesburg's artistic skill. I kind of agree, and I think because it's about process. And many very important artists said the same thing, and architects. Doshi himself said the same thing, not with the very same words, but he was talking about architecture. It's process. Art is not about being, it's about becoming. As a Dadaist, constructivist, visionary, revolutionary, utopian, and malcontent grouse a truculent individual. Truculent, he was irritable, he was a difficult man. Sometimes prone, sometimes contra. Van Doesburg sought to give the role of the artist and of art a proeminent place in society. And that is where his qualities lie, as a trailblazer for an artist's conviction, which is still current and the source of inspiration for new generations of artists. Yes, I do think we need these avant-garde artists. You know, they create that instability which is worth having in art, in life. Art is not being but becoming. So here is, you know, there are all kinds of events about him, exhibitions and so on. So you see, born on August 30th and died in 1931, you know, rather young. Painter, writer, designer, art critic. That's what we need. Again, painters, writers, architects, designers, art critics, and so on. Yes, I think we need this kind of cultural personalities who can do various things, and all of them well. There is an old and a new consciousness of the age. The old one is directed towards the individual. The new one is directed towards the universal. The struggle of the individual against the universal may be seen both in the world war and in modern art. So this is a statement by him. You know, this conflict between le fais et moi and le fais et nous, you know, between, yes, the individual and the collective is an eternal one, and it will always be. But today, you know, today in the morning or last night, I had a strange thought. You know, COVID, the terrible virus that made our meeting actually possible on Zoom. But what if we transform the masculinity of COVID into the femininity of COVIDA? So we add an A to COVID and then put a little horizontal line between co and vida, and this means, in a way, living together, co-vida, like in cooperation. Vida in Spanish and in Portuguese means life. So co-vida is actually, maybe COVID is forcing us to relearn or to learn to live together in a more, even if socially distanced, but with a consciousness oriented towards some kind of a, you know, collectiveness or togetherness, to care not just about ourselves. So, you know, because I like to play with words, I said to myself, maybe COVID is pushing us towards some kind of a co-vida, meaning you know, a collective consciousness. You know. Anyway, or collective life. That's it. And now, what should I do? Yes, let me ignore for a little bit Zaha Hadid and not Zaha Hadid, they still, and show this incredible British artist whom I admire a lot because I think he's excellent. With a difficult name for me, Anthony, because he doesn't have that H, and because after G is O, not R. Somehow I always say Anthony Gormley, but it's not Gormley, it's Gormley, even difficult to pronounce, I think. Anyway, his vision of a human being is appropriate for our time because we are pixelated. I feel I am pixelated, you know, I am not really whole, you know, I'm just a sum of fragments, and I only approximate a human silhouette and maybe a human consciousness. So I think his vision is not always like this, but still the multiplicity of the human body or the human presence in his sculpture seems to show the paradoxical anonymity we arrived at a time of extreme individualism, because I think this is what is happening. You know, capitalism emphasized and overemphasized individuality, competition, but somehow the more this was accomplished, the more anonymous and lost in a way we became. The more, you know, we became indistinct from each other. Besides, of course, the presence of the big stars and so on. But essentially his portraits and his, you know, his human bodies and his representations of the human are, you know, without great individuality, you know, despite the, you know, the differences between, you know, one sculpture and the other, but essentially they are paradigmatic representations of anonymity, if I can say something like this. If we are to compare him to his own work, to his own sculpture, you know, in a way the sculpture tells a truth which the photograph of him doesn't. You know, the facial, you know, data disappeared, and his body is also constituted of a sum of fragments that pixels, you know, that could belong to anyone else. So he's a philosopher in a sense, you know, and any great artist is also a philosopher because there are meanings behind the artwork. He's obsessed with the human body and with a human being. it's incredible the variety of artworks, you know, and how different artists are. If we compare him with Giacometti, for example, you know, who also was very interested in the human body, in the human silhouette. So very different. But we see here also some connection now with the architecture of Zaha Hadid Architects, because it's this structure that becomes ornament, even a neurotical kind of ornament, this viscerality, not just in line as it is here, but also in space and in materiality in the architecture of Zaha Hadid Architects. And these are also beautiful, I think, although they show a human body which is, you know, troubled, if I can say so. You know, these are psychological states that are expressed through physical means or artistic means. You know, why do I say psychological? Because, you know, the relationship between the human being and the so-called environment is complex. And here you see the, you know, those blurrings, aggressive blurrings, if I can call them so, of the limits of the human body, which could show irritation, puzzlement. There are all kinds of, you know, traits that could approximate what we see here. The question could be, is this an optimistic art or not? Or is it pessimistic? Maybe it's both. But it makes you think, you know, it makes you realize that when you say, I am, is not enough. Because when you say, I am, you should also infer something else, that you are not alone, you know, like Buckminster Fuller said that, you know, the problem with the environment or the environmentalists or with the environmentalism is that the environment, the world, describes everything that is outside of the human being without the human being, while the cosmos implies everything that is outside of the human being plus the human being. And what we see here is some kind of a connection, although, you know, tangent and problematic and approximative, between the human being and what is outside of the human being. It's not an easy negotiation, but there is some kind of, you know, attempt or the sketch of an attempted negotiation. Now, this is a, you know, another theme that preoccupies him is, you know, we can analyze it a little bit. You know, is it, you know, the birdman, you know, is the desire to fly that we all have, not necessarily in a physical way, but maybe in a spiritual way. Maybe there is an Icarus in all of us. We want to approach the sun, but we know that our wings might melt down just as they melted down in the case of Icarus. The wings are disproportionate; they are huge compared to the end. You know, maybe this is a commentary on the risks, or a commentary on the you know, the excesses of desire. You know, that I don't know. I'm just improvising some thoughts now, but I let the image speak by itself to you. And then we have something else, and even here, truly, this sculptor needs attention and needs reflection. inevitably, when I look at these images, I ask myself, who are we? Who am I? The angel of the north, quite big and remarkable. I don't know if I can say anything intelligent now about it, but the image itself makes me and makes us ask questions, I think, or be silent. The extruded man, in a way. Hello, happy birthday to you, Mr. Gormley. You did it. You did it. We have to acknowledge it. You did it. Bravo to you. I wonder what the artists or the citizens of ancient Athens, for example, would have thought of this art, or the people living, let's say, 2,000 years ago, or 2,500 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago. What would have they thought, if they saw such an installation or such an art exhibit or exhibition? There was an important Romanian philosopher, Emil Cioran, who said, in the remote past, the human being was the slave of the gods, was enslaved by the gods, but was highly creative, while we are free today, but we are sterile. And maybe, the creativity of Gormley is some kind of exasperated attempt to escape sterility. But yes, we are in a strange moment in our history. I mean, I don't think this kind of art would have been possible, even 200 years ago, or maybe even 100 years ago. 100 years ago. We are climbing on the ceiling, on the walls. We are the peak of our freedom, but we are also very entrapped. Somehow. How do you explain it? It's probably an expression of the fact that we don't have any longer a shared symbolic order, the kind religion provided. So we are at the peak of our freedom, but look at us. We feel like walking on the ceilings, or on the walls. This is also a huge sculpture. Doesn't it go kind of well with the Macau hotel by Zaha Hadid? I think it does. It's just a skeleton, really. It's in a way, it's a structural ghost. On the other hand, here we are. So on one hand, we saw that huge structural ghost, and now we see this multitude, this, how many? 200,000 clay figures. I don't think he did all of this by himself. And, a lot of his work was probably done with a number of assistants. But what do you think he wants to say through this, It's, almost a humorous tension between the paintings on the walls and the multitude of these little clay beings. He is a very interesting sculptor, and he deserves, attention and reflection. In a way, this is our world today, we are so many on this earth, but we are on an, we are all on this so-called planet. I hesitate to use the word planet to describe the earth. It's both unlimited and limited at the same time. And a few days ago, I had a strange thought to initiate a call for entries, projects for a flat earth. I don't know very well what I had this thought before many years ago when people asked me, or even if they didn't ask me, I told them, for me, the earth is flat and probably supported by 4 elephants at the corners. And they always looked at me strangely. But now that thought came back, and I wonder, how would we do some architectural projects for a flat earth, not a round earth, but a flat earth? Somehow this picture made me think of this again. Yes, it's a problem. How do you how do you handle placing all these little clay beings in this ocean of look? It's quite a task. I don't know, but something similar was for the Zen builders of the beautiful Zen gardens of Kyoto, where also you couldn't disturb the sand of the magnificently displayed or placed, sand in the middle of the garden. How would you step away from it once you did some work there? It's the same here. It's an amusing picture, I think. I don't know. What would she do when she arrives, in this corner? She has to break through the wall. I mean, what would she do? Anyway. Sorry for my unprofessional or non-academic amusement. Anyway, this is the relationship between art and life. As Charles Baudelaire said, it has 2 halves. One half speaks about the ephemeral and the other about the eternal. And here the ephemeral is the amusing walking or dancing of these 2 ladies, and the eternal is represented by these 200,000 clay figurines or figures. Anyway, that's it. So should we talk a little bit if anyone is still here, or let's make a little bit of a pause? There are still 8 people. I was afraid. I'm always afraid, because when I present, I don't know how many people are still here, and if there are still some people here, and I panic that when I end the presentation and I look of the of the participation, I might not have enough reasons for optimism. But anyway, so I showed a little bit, Zaha Hadid or Patrick Schumacher or both. I showed a little bit of Van Doesburg. I showed a little bit Anthony Gormley, and I still have Piet Mondrian and Gary Drilveld. But allow me to have a short pause, and maybe we can talk a little bit. And if you want, then I can, in 5 minutes, I can continue with Gary Driedveld and Piet Mondrian by the way of Theo van Doesburg. So if you want to say anything, please do so, whatever that is. Because if you are silent, then I feel like I have to continue. I might be a little bit...
Hi, Dan.
Please continue.
Hi, Echo.
Yeah, please
Hi, Dan.
continue.
Pardon? And then I forget to restart it, sorry. It's terrible, you know. Anyway, it is what it is. Life is always right, as Le Corbusier himself said. So from the current slide, come on, Monsieur Piet Mondrian. What is very interesting is that, you know, we know the paintings, you know, that made him famous, but his earlier paintings are beautiful and they are figurative, and they are about trees and cathedrals or churches. There is a large series of paintings with cathedrals and a large series of paintings with trees. And sometimes you see in the same painting the tree and the cathedral, or the trees and the cathedral. And I love this about Mondrian. He was obviously fluctuating between culture and nature, and between religion and art, you know, and religion and nature. So why was he painting so many cathedrals and churches? I hope I have here some pictures with that period in his life. At the beginning, this is the organized room, but I understood he had another room which was not so organized. Anyway, this is in itself an artwork, you know. Look how integrated the paintings are in the, you know, in the room, and everything is clean and nice, and it's just fine, you know. And the chair, because of that thing on the top, seems to have some comfort. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong. That's what I read. I see this room is also organized, but that's what I read, that he had 2 rooms. Maybe this is a different apartment, not the one that I read about in a book called The World as a Labyrinth. Anyway, early paintings. These I wanted you to see, and I'm so glad they are in this presentation. He was a mystic, no doubt. Mondrian was a mystic, and it shows, you know. I mean, you know, whatever it is, sunset or sunrise, it's the sun of mysticism that is rising or setting. And I told you, is the church and the trees. And look at the trees. It's almost like the chaotic, you know, architectures of today that are possible because of the technologies we have. The church, of course, and the Dutch do have very impressive brick churches and stone churches, many that are not in the histories of architecture. But I have a book, I have actually 11 books with the Netherlands, with art in the Netherlands, and they show incredible buildings that are, we don't even know the architects. Very, very rich culture. And so, you know, you have the church and you have the tree, but look at the tree, its tension is almost a little bit like that big winged man, Gormley, but with the wings falling, you know. It's a defeated flying human being in a way. But it's also some kind of almost, you can discern a little bit a human silhouette in this tree, you know. It's defeated Icarch, or even some kind of a crucifixion. I like his. This is an intermediate period because he painted trees, you know, less abstracted. These are, he's on his way towards abstraction. And you know, from here to here is a distance now, but you see some approximations of what was to come in this painting. And he's already here, oscillating between verticals and horizontals. It's almost like the tension in the foliage of a tree, but geometrized. If there is such a verb to geometrize, coming from geometry, probably there isn't, and I ask for forgiveness for this so-called poetical license. It is not great poetry. We go back to the expressionism of his trees. Is his soul in these trees? I think that there is turbulence here. Let us not forget he comes from the same land that gave to the world Van Gogh, and it shows. A great painter, Piet Mondrian, no doubt. This is an earlier painting where he was not so tormented, and but there is often, the dialectics between the work of man, in this case a house, and the landscape, or the work of man, of God, meaning nature. The silhouette of a church here with a sketched tree, another church. Now, why would he be so interested in churches? Because I think his intuitions were that art cannot be divorced from some form of worship. You are worshiping the world and the mystery of existence and the mystery of the world and of creation and of nature. So you cannot be indifferent. Again, house and trees. Here the trees are, almost embroidered at the top part. And I'm again thinking a little bit about what we saw in the parametric exhibitionism of Zaha Architects, or acrobatics, I should say. I should have said acrobatics instead of exhibitionism. The acrobatics, yes, of parametry. Another church. This one we saw. This one is a similar painting with a tree to the one we already saw. Here we see the abstractization of the facade of a church, which is hidden but still can be seen. And all the, much older painting, but essentially is the same Mondrian, nature, trees, churches and houses, and the sky above. He was searching for himself. He was trying to find his way, and in the end he did. And it's such a distance, and at the same time there isn't a distance at all between his early work and his latest work with a boogie woogie series on Broadway in Manhattan, where he arrived. But you see here, I think, on one hand, the certitude that the religion is supposed to provide, the center, the solace, the comfort of eternal truth, and then in front the imbalanced trees, and life has both, I think, and we have to create a balance between the two. I could perhaps put it bluntly and maybe simplistically like this. He was searching for God. Otherwise, why would he paint all those trees and all those churches? Because in both cases, it was about the same thing. And here you see the evolution, if we can call it so, from the earlier works at the top and the latest works at the bottom. But it's the same painter and it's the same man at a different stage in his life. This is a painting from the Boogie Woogie series, Broadway Boogie Woogie in Manhattan, because he moved to the United States for the last period in his life. And yes, he arrived at these paintings that are, almost dramatically simplified and abstracted, if I can say so. And they are very moving, you know, when you see them here on, you know, small dimensions on a laptop or whatever, it's one thing. But when you see them in a museum, they are emotionally charged, most of them. I could say that he was actually trying to create a peace or an harmony or a balance between the masculine principle and the feminine principle. And in their dialectics, maybe is what we call life. And there is order and disorder. So he was attempting what many great artists try to attempt, to unite the opposites, conjunctio oppositorum, to have order and disorder. As you can see, you have structure, but you also have ornament, in the sense that the ornament is a betrayal, a partial betrayal, so to speak, of the structure, is a deviation from the dogma of the structure. And here you see it too. That's it. So this one also was, you know, an introduction to Piet Mondrian and not more. But you know, we went through many things today, and I hope you don't regret that you participated. Those of you who are still here, and I'm happy that not too many people deserved it, so to speak. Because believe
Okay,
me,
thank you, Dan.
well, you're welcome, Echo. You know, I struggle more to send invitations than to actually prepare the presentations. I have to find a way to create a newsletter or something, because you know, it takes me hours every day, because Yahoo, in its immense generosity, freezes my email accounts if I send a certain number of emails, and then I have to wait for a few hours, and then I use another email address, and it's just a struggle and a hassle, and I hated it. But you know, I don't. On the other hand, also people are suspicious. Why do I receive emails? Why don't I receive a newsletter with a clear option to subscribe or unsubscribe? You know, and you know, they don't read the words. You know, they just they are in a hurry. So I have to do something about this. I have to create a newsletter. Anyway, you know, we pay homages. So we paid homage to Patrick Schumacher today, to Theo van Doesburg, to Anthony, without an H, Anthony now again I have problems with his name, you know, because I feel like saying Gromley, but it's Gormley. Jesus, there's something wrong with his name. And and then Piet and Mondrian and Gerrit Rietveld as side dishes, so to speak, by the way of the steel. And tomorrow, I don't know if Francesca is still here. I see her name is here, but sometimes, you know, she goes away. But if she's here, but even if she's not here, she will make tomorrow, and I'm sure she will make a very good presentation on a very difficult subject, and that is Patrick Schumacher. And maybe tomorrow we can continue the discussion about the architect and society, and the relationship between, you know, the act of creation and the act of, you know, being with empathy. So we can have tomorrow. We could have tomorrow a fruitful time, I think, if you have the time and the interest to attend. So the big so-called Patrick Schumacher Day will be tomorrow. But I don't know, maybe some of you don't like him, so